AI companion that's always on your side. You don't necessarily need to prompt it or like do something to invoke a response from the AI. It can essentially anticipate when there's
Yeah.
something you might need or whatever it is.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Accelerometer. Today, we have Gabe from Zenfetch. Gabe was in my group in YC.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so many different subsets of YC. We went through a very large YC group. And Gabe was also in my pool a few weeks ago.
I was. First time in a pool in Brooklyn. That was kind of
Really?
cool. Yeah.
Isn't Brooklyn all about the pool parties?
It might be. It might be. Frankly, where I live, not too many pools around. So this was my first experience, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, that's really too bad.
Yeah. Oh.
Where in Brooklyn are you living?
I live in Williamsburg.
Oh,
yeah.
So you're a hipster.
I am a hipster. Yeah, honorary hipster. From what I understand, it's where a lot of the YC founders live. So yeah, when I was there, I mean, there's even a WhatsApp group chat for YC founders in Williamsburg alone.
WhatsApp. So not even like Messenger. So it's even a hipster group chat.
Correct. Yeah. One step away from maybe going to Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Zenfetch.
Absolutely. Yeah. Zenfetch is essentially a tool for thought. It's a way for writers and other knowledge workers to leverage the information that they've consumed in the past. You can think of it as like a helpful companion to recognize the context of the content you're writing or the content you're reading and be able to build mental associations with information you've come across in the past.
How does it do that?
There's a couple of ways. One is we essentially track the information you're consuming online. Think of it as if you use tools like Pocket or similar to save articles or YouTube videos, we ingest that information and recognize what are the most salient topics from that content. Then in the future, when you're reading new information, new articles, new YouTube videos, we give you the ability to tie mental associations based on the content of this new information and those previous saves.
That's very cool. How did you come up with this idea?
Oh my God. Okay. Well, honestly, my co-founder Akash and I, we've been in the startup game for a while, or at least been really interested in it. And all of last year, we were talking about different ideas and, different things that motivated us to keep working. And one of them was this concept that we read so much information every day, right? Whether that's from forums like Hacker News or, podcasts or other YouTube videos. And we have a tough time keeping track of it all. We were doing things like, we read an article, we bookmark the link, but then that quickly compounds, and then your bookmark tabs are like impossible and unwieldy to manage. Or we would like save links in Notion or other Google Workspace folders, hoping that someday we'd revisit them. And typically what happens is that information also grows and you never actually, manage to activate that when you need it. And so we had all these solutions for storing this information and not a good one for getting it when we needed it. We would just like forget we even read certain articles, which could have been really helpful sometime in the future. And then we thought, with all the modern advancements in machine learning and whatnot, now might be a good time to actually develop a tool that could help solve that problem.
Have you ever thought about like perhaps maybe building a phone and specifically like just putting your tool on the phone, make it like zero interface?
Yeah, are you thinking similar to the way you communicate with Siri or something like that? I definitely think there's some interesting applications for kind of building at the operating system level for a tool like this. In terms of feasibility, that's not where we're starting right now, but definitely something in line with how we think it could work in the future. In general, we kind of see this product as building towards a vision of ambient AI, an AI companion that's kind of like on your side, present at all times, and can infer when there is something from your knowledge base that could help you in the current moment. So yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a possibility. Yeah, we'll see.
Does that excite you?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
I'm just waiting for this day that you can make a phone.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we're not the hardware experts.
Yeah.
But you never know. Maybe we'll come across someone who has like a deep passion for this kind of stuff and would love to implement a hardware version of this technology. I've been seeing the recent like Twitter feuds with Dan from Rewind and I forgot his name, Avi from Tab, and they're essentially building like similar pendants that record all this information so that at some point you can also activate it. I've seen some people even like compare it to Black Mirror episodes, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It's a possibility for sure.
What's been the hardest part about building so far for you?
Yeah, I feel, honestly, I think one of the most challenging parts about building, especially early stage startup, is less so maybe the technical challenges or the implementation details. It's having the will to build something and being ready to just scrap it entirely in favor of something else that could be a little bit more robust for what you're actually trying to accomplish. Especially, prior to do my own startup, I felt this kind of pain when working on other projects. Anytime that those projects were sunset or deprioritized because of other company objectives that were higher priority, dealing with that kind of sense of I put all this effort into developing something and now it's not going to see the light of day is like, it hurts. Anytime you do something like that. And in a startup, it's just like magnified because you try so many things very quickly. And as you're continuously iterating, you find that certain decisions you made were not the optimal ones, even though they may have felt like it at the time. But you ultimately have to make a difficult decision of saying, yes, we invested a lot in this, but it's no longer the best choice. So it's time to shift gears and try something new.
So shifting a little bit to YC.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah. Complete non sequitur, of course.
Right.
How was your time?
YC was intense, honestly. Yeah. But really rewarding. Akash and I both moved to San Francisco for the batch. We even strongly considered relocating permanently to the batch, to San Francisco. I had never lived in SF. I had only visited for maybe a weekend in the past. And I actually really liked it when I visited the weekend, but I was one of those people who's like, New York ride or die type of situation. And a lot of my friends are here. The community I've built up is here. So prior to moving to SF, I told Akash, like, okay, I'm down for the batch because I think it does make sense to, be there, understand what it's like. But I was adamant that we had to come back to New York after the fact. And maybe like a month into living in San Francisco, I thought to myself, oh, this is actually a pretty cool city. Like I actually kind of like it. And we seriously thought about fully moving there. So kind of the plan was, all right, my lease goes until the summertime, so let's come back, ride out the rest of the summer. But then in the time we were back, we just kind of thought like, for some businesses, it does make sense to be in SF, and maybe it would make sense for us to be in San Francisco, but we haven't felt any serious disadvantages in New York. So yeah, and we're just happy here, so good founder community, also good VC community, frankly. So
how do you get into YC?
Oh my gosh. All right, high level, just don't give up. I mean, frankly, it's the same with startups. It's a game of attrition, right? If you just keep going, you'll figure something out. With YC, Akash and I actually, this was our third time applying. The first two times, we were both still in college, applying with a social e-commerce idea. Have you heard of Temu? Are you familiar with the app? You can kind of like Temu, high level, just be able to shop with friends, whatever. At the time we thought like the vision and the idea was really cool. And I think we, the product we actually built, we got a few people using it, but it never really took off. And but we did apply to IC twice with that idea. By I think about a year in, just put that project to rest, put that startup to rest. We each went into industry, and about a year into industry, we were like, no, we need to go back to startup. We need to, that was our calling. So we just kind of like every every few days would meet over Zoom because he was living in San Francisco at the time. I was in New York. And we just iterate on ideas, talk about, what's something we could build, something we could put out there. And then a friend of ours, actually in our batch, he called Akash one day and said, "Oh, Akash, I'm actually quitting Meta." They were both at Meta. And he says, "Yeah, we got into YC, so we're going to build a startup." And Akash is like, "Oh my God, that's incredible. I had no idea that, you guys were building this product on the side. Like, what is it about?" And then he looks at Akash and says, "Oh, no, like, we just had an idea. It's like, we just applied with that. We don't have any product. We don't have anything. We're just a team." And then Akash looks at me and we're just thinking to ourselves, like, we can do that, right? Like, why not? Why not give it another shot? And so, yeah, so we just, spent a solid week, putting together a document with what it is we wanted to build, which is actually what we're currently building. And a lot of the motivation behind it, because again, we've been thinking about this for a long time. Don't get me wrong. It's just we hadn't necessarily built a product. Threw an application together, reached out to, I think it was one or two people who had done YC in the past, asked them to do a quick, 5-minute look at the application, let us know their thoughts. That was really helpful. If that's an option for people, I'd say they should strongly consider it. I'm even like open to reviewing people's applications. I've done it for some friends now. But yeah, then we just applied and we had the 10-minute interview. I'm sure you had something similar. Totally thought we bombed the interview, by the way. We had that interview and it was with Dalton and Liz and we ended the interview. We called each other. Akash and I called each other immediately after, like, "It's okay, man. We'll apply to summer 23, right? Like, it's not going to work out, but it's no big deal." But I don't know. I guess things just worked out. Following day, we got the call from Dalton. He's like, "Hey guys, like, you've been accepted into YC and whatnot." So that was really cool.
Are there any other startups that you admire?
Yeah, honestly. A lot of them are from, I think, our batch, because that's what I was exposed to, right? Especially over the last year.
I'm just going to assume Anarchy is one of them.
Anarchy is definitely there. A lot of people from our section I actually really admire. I think in general, I've just, over the last year, I've grown a deep admiration for founders and really creators, right? Like, even if that's you're creating music or TikTok videos or anything, or podcasts, because it's really hard and nobody just gets it right off the bat. I think it's easy to construe this image of like folks who they've known right away, but that's because they don't tend to share all the hard work that went into it ahead of time. And so honestly, like, I just admire the founders that are still in it. The ones who, I remember that when Brian Armstrong spoke in our batch, he said something along the lines of, if you haven't been working on your startup for at least 2 years, you haven't really given it a shot, right? Or at least like really tried. And I kind of see why. I mean, you're never, rarely are you just gonna hit it off, and have one of those like spike, exponential growth curves. So you have to be willing to weather the storm and weather the lows of building a startup. And if you have that persistence and determination, I just really admire that. So, but I guess if I had to give one shout out, I'm a little biased because they were our roommates during San Francisco, but big fan of Inkeep from our batch. I really like what they're doing. Great founding team. Yeah. And Anarchy, of course. It goes without saying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what was, I guess, your hardest moment? What was the thing that you weathered?
Oh my God. Honestly, pivot hell, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, you were in our section, right? So I don't know if you recall, but
yeah, I recall you might have pivoted.
Might have pivoted a little bit.
But you're doing the thing that you applied with now.
Doing the thing that we applied with. We've really come full circle.
I love that.
Yeah. I wrote like a brief Substack about, this whole high level pivoting decision, but yeah, I mean, we were in the same section, so every other week we'd meet?
Every other week.
Every other week we'd meet, and Akash and I kind of dreaded going into it because we always thought, like, one thing is to not hit your goals, right? You set goals of, this week I'm going to hit 3K MRR, or next week, whatever, right? Whereas for us, it's like we couldn't even have goals because we were having so much difficulty settling on the problem we wanted to work on and the idea we should pursue. And I mean, that's essentially what pivot hell is, right? It's like trying to figure out, okay, let's assume that your startup's not working. Let's find a new direction. It was also tough because we just weren't super constrained, right? We like thought very broadly, like all the problems we could think of, and that did not help at all. Um, but yeah, eventually, I think we reached a low, which was just essentially burnout from pivoting so much. Um, we found this one idea with sales tech. Again, I wrote about it already, and we decided we're just going to keep at it and just be persistent and keep going. And we went with it for a few months. It's not the 2 years by any measure, but we reached a point where we realized, at least the current strategy we were doing was not working, and it was time to consider a serious, change in strategy, changing product direction. It didn't have to be a full blown pivot, but we had gotten to this point as well where we were just so exhausted working in a space we didn't understand. We felt a little bit like frauds, honestly, like trying to sell a sales tool when we were amateur salesmen, right? And so, we just decided, and the whole time we kept thinking like, man, why did we leave that first idea? Like, I really want it. Like, we had countless times throughout this pivot hell experience where we were like, man, if we just had that tool, it'd be so great, because then I could ask, my knowledge base or like get inspiration for things. And I think ultimately it came down to is we said, if the startup were to fail, would we rather die on the like B2B sales hill, or just give it our all on this kind of like moonshot or I don't know if it's actually moonshot, but this like ambient AI idea. And I think we just decided like, what, let's just full send. And so that's where we're at now. Yeah.
At what point did you realize, like during those selling and the sales tools, that like that wasn't going to work?
I think we really internalized it. I think we went a solid month of having really, really strong unwavering conviction with the sales, with especially the real-time conversational intelligence. And we had a lot of like, I want to say like misleading positive signals, right? Things that we thought were really good, but they really amounted to nothing. And then around maybe 3 months in, around June, early July, we were running a full-fledged sales motion. So we were like those annoying salespeople who, like, not to say they're annoying, by the way, I actually have a lot of respect for them, but cold emailing, cold calling, and repetitively with the same group, with the same person. And that was really tough, frankly, for me at least. I'm a developer at the end of the day. I'm not it's a special skill to be able to cold call. It's really hard. What was cool, by the way, when we ran this is we actually started to understand the existing products for sales and like why certain products exist and what needs they fulfilled.
Yeah.
And so that was cool. That was like, oh my God, I'm finally building empathy for a salesperson, especially like a B2B SaaS one.
And eventually you'll learn how to build your sales team doing that.
Yeah, totally. Like, I mean, that YC always preaches this idea of like founder-led sales. And I totally see the merit in it, right? But yeah, I think by mid-July, we had like really exhausted our funnel, and we just knew that if we kept at it, we might get something to work. But we also felt pretty confident we were going to burn out. And at the end of the day, I think it was something like, the two things that kill startups are like essentially burnout, like running out of energy, or running out of money. And running out of energy tends to be the most common one, from what I understand. So, yeah. You guys pivoted a bit too, though, right? I don't know if necessarily it's extreme, but
we pivoted so many times since starting this. It started out as code search, then became code generation, but for fun.
For fun, okay, yeah, I like that.
Code generation is a toy.
Okay.
And then we got into YC, and we were like automatic API connector to ChatGPT, and then once Y Combinator ended, I was like, this is clearly not working. Like, we managed to make some sales, but then nobody used the product, so we decided to pivot. And I was just decided to build open source AGI. That's what I'm working on now.
It's pretty sick. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was so for you, I guess, like, what was the impetus to finally move into this open source AGI? Do you think
It's the same. It's what I always cared about. It's always what I wanted. And once I found that I was working on the thing that I wanted to be working on, like it didn't really matter whether it was a good idea or it was a bad idea. What mattered was whether I was putting like 100% of my energy into it. And suddenly once I was putting 100% of my energy into it, things started working.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? Like, have you considered pivoting at all since then?
Not at all.
Yeah. I remember. I don't know if
things are working.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. I remember Dalton gave a talk at the retreat. Maybe you were there. Where he talks about like he knows that people have landed on a pivot when they stop talking about pivoting, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily what he meant, but
yeah.
I feel the same as you. I'm like, you know what? I'm giving 100% of my energy as well, and I love the people I'm building for. I love the product I'm building. I'm using it finally. And it's almost like I don't really care if, like 2 years later, like it didn't go anywhere. Like regardless, the fulfillment is just like through the roof. I'm really enjoying it, and I feel like things are working as well, just because I guess maybe it's like I'm just more invested in it personally.
Yeah. Another one of the realizations for me was moving up in terms of the abstraction of how I was thinking when I was an engineer. I was thinking in terms of features, in terms of like very tiny, very specific products. And during YC, the companies that I saw succeed, they were like, I'm building this product category. And then they talked to customers. And whenever a customer said, like, I want this built, they just built it. They weren't thinking like, I'm a company that does this feature. They were just like, I'm a company that does all of these features. And suddenly once you're doing the thing that you want to be doing, generally, you can just say, sure, I'll build that too. Sure, I'll build that too. This is my category. I'm happy with that category. You don't have to pivot out of a category. You just pivot like your feature. And then you don't want to say I'm pivoting my feature. You just say, I'm going to build that feature.
Right.
When did you first get in contact with AGIs?
With AGIs?
Yeah.
Interesting. Similar, you mean LLMs and of that stuff, type of thing? Honestly, my background with machine learning and AI was always in computer vision applications. So I was pretty familiar from that standpoint. I started getting a little more into the whole, natural language side of things, maybe 2019, 2020.
So computer vision, though.
Yeah.
What were you working on in computer vision?
A few different things, but most of my work in that field was around glaucoma prognostication. How we could use like eye tests from the ophthalmologist visits to forecast how much glaucoma, like the degenerative eye disease, would progress over time for patients who are high at risk. And so, the CV part there is like each test is essentially this like 52-dimensional vector that you can represent as kind of like a square image. So that was like where most of my work was. Other than that, it was, just studying in like school and whatnot.
So how did you get into AI for glaucoma?
Really, it was a matter of I was really interested in working with a certain professor at my school, and he specialized in deep learning, actually really in medical robotics. And he had this research opening with like a joint appointment with the Wilmer Eye Institute at Hopkins. So they, like eye specialty, whatever, ophthalmology. And yeah, it's just kind of by chance. But like I said, I joined it at first with the intention to stick with it for a couple of months, a summer position, and it ended up being about 1.5 years.
Has any of the skills that you picked up doing computer vision from back in the day, has any of that translated to working with large language models?
Yeah, I think like in general with the ML process, data cleaning, right?
Yeah.
There's only so much you can do with large language models, or really any ML model, if you don't have quality data sets and quality inputs. And I've found that in my experience working in data science, the bulk of time is in, some form of like data cleaning or feature engineering and whatnot. So many of those skills are pretty transferable. Also things related to like visualizing data distributions and whatnot. That's, a lot of those things, it all comes down to just like the pre-processing. And then, of course, there are certain things that change with the model. But But yeah, most of this stuff is, in my opinion, just like before you even get to the model. So
Yeah. Is there anything that you see people doing that you don't think they should be doing?
maybe less so on product development. I think that what I have seen is for a number of people who are just starting to get into like content creation or like content marketing or content creation or something, it's very easy to uh, use large language models to generate content. And, to like the casual observer, the output of a tool like ChatGPT might seem like very high quality, or oh my gosh, like this is clearly so much better than anything I could produce. But at the end of the day, right, tools like ChatGPT are just going to produce kind of like the expected value of all the like content marketing of the world. So, if your goal is to kind of like stand out and that's pretty important, especially when you're early on and trying to like find your voice, find your niche. I think that it's a little bit short-sighted to use tools like ChatGPT. I think it is very powerful. For example, like one application I use it in for content creation and content marketing is to kind of understand one, like the general flow of something I'm writing, and two, also like, and this is I'm still playing around with it, but I often ask ChatGPT, how would you interpret what I just said, just to make sure that a model like ChatGPT can spit back to me what I want readers to capture. And it's not perfect by any means, but it's kind of like an interesting proxy for how I would imagine most people would read an article and what they would take away. Of course, I pair that with actually asking some people to proofread what I said and get their take, but that has been kind of a fun use of it so far.
I guess another problem with that is, hallucinations also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever have to deal with hallucinations in your product?
I wish I could say we don't, but no, that's definitely like one problem is hallucinations, right? Where it just you try to have the model index on the content I'm supplying, right? So if you want to like in our use case, right, you saved a lot of information or you've digested a lot of information. I want to make sure that the stuff I service to you is from that content. And if we take a naive approach of just saying like, hey, ChatGPT, here's an article, spit out an answer, oftentimes it has baked in biases. And so even with that content, it doesn't necessarily produce what the user might expect. And there's no guarantees that it's truthful. So that is something we are actively working to mitigate. And it's not necessarily like the highest concern for us, but definitely hallucinations are an interesting challenge. I'm not sure if there's a clean way to tackle them. I mean, there's so much money going into hallucination research anyways. So yeah.
What is something that you're doing to mitigate it?
One kind of simple approach is to chain like LLMs together, right? Where you generate some output on a first pass, and then you use other models to essentially evaluate consistency and hallucinations from that output. And then based on some score, like some threshold that you determine, hopefully using heuristics, you can essentially like refine the answer and get closer and closer to the truth, right? I think that coupled with, just getting feedback from the end user, right? It's really helpful if they tell us, or just in like internal testing, if we see that something is hallucinating, we can use that to refine whether it's the prompt or the model or the feedback loop. Something to mitigate those hallucinations. When we talk about what are the limits of AGI, I'm not saying this is a good way to think about it, but sometimes I think like if I use a human as a proxy, if a human can do this task, then it's likely a model could perform just as well or better, which is also something we do for like image classification and stuff. It's like if a human cannot discern differences, like why it's often the case that a model will also not be able to discern differences, something we even faced in my prior work. So yeah, I actually kind of question, like, is it possible for a human to always prevent hallucinations, or is there something baked into how we think and how we operate that we naturally have a tendency to hallucinate certain items?
Yeah. What's something that you're particularly excited about for the future of AI?
Is it a little corny to say ambient AI?
What is ambient AI?
Kind of like the vision that we're building towards of a AI companion that's always on your side. You don't necessarily need to prompt it or like do something to invoke a response from the AI. it can essentially anticipate when there's
Yeah.
something you might need or whatever it is.
So screw pendant. Like, why not like a brain implant?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like I think the whole field of brain computer interfacing is really interesting. I think there's a lot of potential. It's a really hard problem. And I honestly don't know too much about it, just like from friends who work in the field. But I'd love to see something, like Neuralink is working on to, evolve into like, people essentially having like real life augmentation of their memory, of their like brain computing like resources. I guess that enters also this whole other, like philosophical dilemma of what does it mean to be human, right? And then if we start like adding these implants, are we like creating a new species? I don't know. I haven't thought that much about it, but I do think it's cool, and I respect people who are trying. So,
Do you want to stay human?
my answer could change. Right now, yes. Right now, I think that there's a lot of beauty in human and the fault of within like humanity. I mean, of course, there are a lot of problems in the world and whatnot, but not even that aside. Just like I don't know, it's like pretty interesting to recognize that we're not perfect beings, and maybe there are ways to improve it. But for now, I guess I'd say I like being human. I don't see myself being a cyborg anytime soon. My co-founder might answer differently, actually. I think he's like more on the whole, like, could be cool to, wear implants and things like that. But yeah. Are you trying to become a cyborg?
A little bit.
A little bit? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I respect that.
I mean, I want it to be a good experience before
Okay, yeah.
I decide to become a cyborg.
Right. I just think I'm not an early adopter on anything that's like modifications to my body,
Yeah. There are definitely people out there, I think, who would prefer like any sort of digital experience to the physical experience. And I wouldn't say that I like digital more than physical, but my feeling is that if we work hard enough, we can make digital that's better than physical. We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. Right.
I don't know how long it's going to take.
Yeah. Maybe sooner rather than later, though. Who knows? Maybe in like 5 years, we'll have like the metaverse will actually be like really immersive,
Is there anything else you would like to say to the universe?
For all the founders out there, what I've learned in my short tenure of being a founder is a lot of this game is just, like we discussed, persistence and not giving up. I think, and this goes beyond founders, of course, any creator, anybody who has like an original idea that they really want to pursue. If you have the means, which of course is like an important dependency, but if you have the means, it's just a matter of determination and keep going. So, that's all I really could offer. That, and also wear sunscreen. It's the only other advice I think is pretty universal, and people should, if they have the means, they should also do that.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Great having you, Gabe.
It was great being on here. Awesome podcast.
Thank you.